Hello, friends. Welcome to Nirmal. I'm Piyush Jain, and it's a budget time. It's a time where every year we actually talk about what perhaps is going to come in the budget this time. Remember, the budget is the one which actually decides what kind of policies are going to come up and also going to decide the course of the next year, where the government is going to put in money, what sort of taxes are going to come, what sort of policies are going to come, where the government is going to spend from social spending, revenue spending, to where actually the capex is going to be put. Different sectors, different industries, they actually put their expectations in front of the government, and that's why it is of a lot of interest for everybody, from industries to individuals, to entire economists, from the perspective actually how the economy basically is going to sort of be shaping up. To understand this time about what we should be expecting from the budget, let me welcome now an industry veteran who is actually who's not a stranger to anybody. But let me introduce him, Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti from Shailesh Haribhakti Associates, the chairman of the company. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. What a pleasure to be with you.
Sir, it's another budget, and I would say this perhaps is going to be the record six budget for the finance minister. We have seen it has been tremendous success over the last few years. Again, this year, which we are closing, FY24, record GST collections, record direct tax collections, indirect tax collections, compliance is looking very good. What do you really expect from the perspective of how the sort of fiscal deficit numbers are going to look like? And broadly, sort of how's the sort of outlook going to look like?
So, we must start by complimenting the finance minister for having adopted some extraordinarily effective tax practices. What that has resulted in is that our tax to GDP ratio has grown to a level that it had never reached before. We are now approaching developed country status in terms of tax to GDP ratio. The buoyancy in tax emerges from the fact that trust has been established between the taxpayer and the tax gatherer. Today, I can cite you innumerable examples of people who, because of the faceless assessment, have got their refunds in their designated bank account within 3 days of filing of their return, which I think is an unprecedented achievement
True.
by the Indian tax system. What that has resulted in is very buoyant direct and indirect taxes. So I would say the first big change that I am expecting is that just as direct taxes have become more full of trust, the GST regime will also become more full of trust. Today, the discretion in the GST framework with the tax assessment officers is far more than it is with the direct tax assessors. And that I think the finance minister will make some critical announcements to bring about more digital interface and more automaticity in terms of reconciling the flows that become part of the indirect tax. I also see a full rationalization glide path being established because this is not going to be a full budget. This is going to be a vote on account. So,
Yes.
directional indicators will come to simplify, integrate, and fully encompass all financial transactions within the ambit of GST. That is the directional movement, and more digitalization and lesser contact with the department will be the big changes that I expect from the tax frame. I'm not saying that there's going to be any major tax reform that will be announced because that will have to wait until the new government is elected. What will happen is simplicity, automaticity, and trust. These will be the watchwords. On the other side of the equation, I'm very clear that the focus will be on making sure that renewables happen at scale. The Prime Minister has already talked about solar rooftops at scale in the whole country. So
1 crore households, a big number.
that will just get going. But that's just the beginning. The real data point that we all need to focus on is that we can deliver renewable power, uninterrupted, high quality power at one third the cost of fossil fuel power. That has been demonstrated in India. And that is the big cutting edge, which will drive massive investment in solar, particularly solar, not so much wind, because the solar technologies are improving at a pace which is far beyond the pace at which the wind technologies. And there is no shortage of battery. We already have lithium. There's enough lithium in the whole world. It's just mal-distributed. We have moved into silicon, and we are also looking at technologies that will help us move to plastic as a source of continuous storage and continuous delivery of power.
And also, sir, now the battery technologies are improving, which might actually make them 24/7 supply.
Absolutely. It will happen during the next 2, 3 years, certainly within this finance minister's tenure, as I expect her to continue in this position because she's done such a fabulous job of it.
So, from that perspective, sir, do you expect a sort of firm allocation of money in this interim budget on the or the vote on account?
So, what will happen is that the capex cycle that has been initiated will continue without stopping the pace. I don't expect any incremental capex because there will have to be a certain amount of allocation for social programs in terms of the rooftop solar and in terms of reaching the benefits to women, to backward classes, and to other sections of society which have remained at the bottom of the pyramid. So I see massive fresh allocations directionally to these issues. See, what happened during the last year is that we had to incur far more of the budget resources on funding the subsidy schemes and on funding the large programs like Manrega. But what has saved us is the fact that our tax buoyancy has kept our fiscal deficit at a controllable level. The other thing that has happened is that the borrowing program was so brilliantly managed during the whole year that we never felt a crowding out of the private sector.
True.
Because a whole lot of money, a wall or a tsunami of money, is now trying to find its way to long term deployment in India in infrastructure assets. And that is something that will be captured. So we'll see some announcements on asset monetization. We will see some directional voice coming out in terms of disinvestment and in terms of enhancing the flows from the public sector. So all this will happen in the vote on account, and then the budget will take care of the actual provisions. We must also realize that this vote on account is coming in the context of the world having agreed and implemented a minimum tax rate of 15%. So 15% is a common tax rate across the whole world. Now we at 25% have reached a threshold below which there is no big room. So what will start happening is simplification, rationalization, and automaticity in the whole tax framework.
But
That's what I.
are you expecting the surcharges to come down? Because that again is a sort of indirect taxation which happens.
Absolutely. I think the surcharge was supposed to cover the runaway fiscal deficit that was happening as a result of the COVID allocations and the food subsidy that we had to provide. The food subsidy is continuing, and so that needs to be funded. But our fisc has improved so dramatically that we now have room for rationalizing truly the net outgo from even the higher slabs of income. And maybe there will be a support to certain directional savings. One of the things that has been mentioned recurrently is the support to the NPS. And I believe that some major announcement will come because, out of political expediency, people, in the hope that they will win elections, were moving away from defined contribution to defined benefit, which is an absolute disaster. And I think the government is going to signal that that disaster we have to stop from happening in our country.
Makes sense. So that's one part here. And also, sir, from the perspective of capital markets, do you expect any sort of announcement in this budget? Because last year also we saw an attempt, or I would say, step towards sort of bridging the different sort of taxation between asset classes, debt, equities. Do you expect any sort of movement in this budget?
None whatsoever in the vote on account at all.
Hmm.
And I think what are the big flows that we are wanting to support in our economy? They are the flows from sovereign wealth funds. They are the flows from large pension funds across the globe, the accumulations in universities and museums. That is the kind of money that now India is ready to tap into. So over there, this little tinkering between some debt instrument and equity instrument and all of that will have no meaning whatsoever. Over there, it's all black and white. You either get it as equity or you get it as debt. That's it.
True. And about the PLI, what's your own sense? That is
I
something which has really been a super success
runaway,
story of this government.
runaway success story of this government. I think it was so beautifully crafted and it incentivized productivity enhancement and production, and therefore the scheme has succeeded. I chair a company which has been the beneficiary of this particular PLI, and we find that it was such a useful, valuable, well structured, and honestly implemented scheme that we are gung ho about capital expenditure for manufacturing.
And from that perspective, do you believe that perhaps now the ambit could be further expanded? For example, you wanted to invite mobile manufacturers, electronic manufacturers, that could be from TVs to then slowly to components. But do you expect this ambit to continue to expand more component ecosystems, even perhaps could go into apparels, toys? The industry has been asking for that. Are you expecting sort of any further move?
Very much. I'm sensing that they want to extend it to all manufacturing, which has two characteristics. One, which has embraced high tech and therefore will deliver high quality, both for the domestic market and for international markets. And two, that which will be sustainability consistent, because the big thrust of this government has to be on reaching our net zero commitment by the time that the Prime Minister has committed, which is 2070. And today we are completely off the curve because our needs and consumption has grown as a result of the phenomenal growth that we are experiencing in our economy. So we'll have to somewhere tilt the balance to embrace technology and sustainability and decarbonization, basically.
Hmm.
So therefore, decarbonization will be a big theme, and AI will be a big theme. So you will see these two words recurrently being mentioned in the vote on account.
Yes, and we also heard last time from quantum computing to AI, there was a sort of thrust there, and the government actually was talking about creating different labs. From the perspective of sir, as a voter account, a general expectation in election year is that government actually also increases revenue expenditure, perhaps actually tries to boost expenditure towards the year ending. What's your own sense? Last time voter account, what you had seen, what you would be expecting this time?
See, this government has realized that gimmickry and election oriented uh, spends don't help. In fact, the Prime Minister has gone multiple times on record to say that रेवड़ी बांटने से कुछ नहीं बनता. What happens is only by good governance and great policies and fabulous implementation, which is based on technology. Just exactly that we discussed at the beginning of our conversation. The way the tax framework has evolved is exemplary. I mean, I have not seen a more trustworthy interaction between taxpayer and tax capital.
Right, and and from that perspective, sir, are you expecting perhaps in this budget, going back from the perspective of industry, what kind of different incentives or different changes you would be expecting? Since it's a voter account, so within that limitation, I would be asking you.
Nothing. I think we will just see a directional announcement about extension of the PLI scheme. We will see rationalization of GST being mentioned without actually doing it. We'll see mention of the minimum tax rate in the world and therefore a benchmark having been set. And we'll see a glide path towards bringing everything under a common simplified goods and services tax. We have still so much VAT and in some cases and excise in other cases, particularly on liquor and petroleum. All those will have to be brought into the framework of the full GST.
And also from the perspective of fiscal deficit, do you expect that perhaps 4.5% FY 25-26, that's what will be retreated by the government because they're in a very comfortable position now?
I would say we should not do anything dramatic which will cut off our capex cycle. That is critically important. The quantum of money that our railways and roads require is almost insatiable. The private sector will pick up the slack in airports, perhaps, and will pick up the slack in ports, and will certainly invest in manufacturing. But what is important is the government will have to stay on track on railways, roadways, and other critical infrastructure like irrigation and year round. Because this year, we are going to reel under the El Nino effect, which will start becoming felt as the rivers have not been full of water this year.
Hmm.
So we are going to see some major commitments having to be made for delivering irrigation across the length and breadth of the country.
Makes sense, and that perhaps is something which is, I think, should be an offering the July when actually the next full budget would be come into picture. But moving on from the other perspective, one question I think which I should be asking you, which was a slide of innovation from the perspective of spending. There was a sort of thrust from the government from the perspective of giving incentives or giving structures to social spending, social exchanges, NGOs. Is that something where you how that impact has been according to you? Was it a success? Are you seeing sort of more efforts being made on that?
It's been a very limited success, to put it mildly. I think this whole social stock exchange has simply not taken off because the word zero twice in an instrument's name is itself a deterrent for any investor to bring any money in. And that is what has happened. कुछ ज़्यादा पैसा रेज नहीं हुआ है और I think we will need to do massive innovation in that sphere because we are just about settling down on FCRA and all the compliances, and we need to create an enabling environment for international conscience-driven money to flow into India because we need it in abundance. We need it at scale. There's a lot of great work to be done for the bottom of the pyramid. So I would say there will be attention which will be diverted to making this work in our frameworks with full transparency, full disclosure, full knowledge of where the money is coming from. So that's what I expect. It will be reformed in a way that more money will get attracted.
Right, sir. And as we move towards our last questions, perhaps a touchback on what you said from the perspective of railways and infrastructure. Railways perhaps has been a huge success story, something which I think we have not seen since many decades. The work which has been done over the last 5 6 years. From that perspective, what do you think? Because last time we heard the government now actually wants to spend and encourage transport between smaller cities. What do you expect? The quantum of the money which railways needs now, will the government sort of give now increase allocation? What sort of sector benefits we should be hearing?
Absolutely. I think the level of investment in railways will be maintained and enhanced. My guess is by approximately 10% over what extraordinary sums were actually invested last year, because that momentum and that growth has to happen. I have personally, now I am preferring traveling by Vande Bharat trains, because between, let us say, Shirdi and Mumbai, there is no better efficient way to travel than to go by the Vande Bharat train. The platforms are better, the train infrastructure is better, everything is so much superior to what we found. And so I think that investment will continue. But the big story, the biggest story of India is the road that has been, the fast tag and the way that tolls are collected and new bridges have been opened up, this MTHL that we saw.
And, and sir, also just jumping in between the sort of new technology which they're talking about, which is now actually removing the toll gates itself. Perhaps that's something I think which they're looking to invest in.
It's the next step. It's the next sensible step. It is a relic of the past. It's like a stranded asset which needs to be removed from there. उसका कोई जरूरत नहीं है.
Absolutely, sir. So I think a vote on account, and perhaps we should be trying again to actually get in touch with you after the budget. But looks like a great year for the government, and perhaps vote on account will be actually a sort of a celebration of that. And after the elections, perhaps the investors I think will like to hear in this budget a bit of glide path as we were talking about, and we actually then would hope to again come back to you and get an assessment of the budget. But for now, sir, as always, thanks a lot for coming on the show and giving us insights on the expectations from the budget.
Delighted, and all the best to you. Let's have a great budget.
And dear viewers, it's a wrap on the show. Hope you enjoyed it.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to never miss an update from Nirmal Bang.